Hey everyone, so up to this point in my series of game development tutorials, I've been trying to demonstrate game development using only free-to-use applications such as Unity, Paint 3D, 3D Builder. The one exception has been Anime Studio. It's not free to use, but it's very inexpensive. There's no recurring subscription fee, and it's a one-time purchase. The last time I checked, it was available for digital download on Amazon for less than $30 for the version 11. But it's not free to use. So that is why I want to start covering Inkscape. Inkscape is available on inkscape.org. It is a completely free to use application. It's not just a trial, it's the full version of the application. And it can do much of what Anime Studio does with one exception. Now, Anime Studio, as the name would suggest, can actually make full animated videos. Inkscape is meant for just individual frames. Now, you can do some animation in a regard, because if you have a character animation, well, that wouldn't really be a video to begin with. Those are individual frames that then get sequenced within the compiler, get sequenced within, say, Unity. So you can do 2D animation. It's just that you're drawing the individual frames and then they get animated after the fact, whereas with Anime Studio, you can actually do a full animated video to begin with. I will cover a separate application that can be used for that purpose. But for now, I want to cover Inkscape. What Inkscape can be used for is, say, for texture. So even in a 3D game, a texture is a 2D image. Okay? There's other things that are done to it to make it look like it has more of a surface. But ultimately, one of the ways to give a 3D model detail is with a 2D texture. You can also use this for drawing 2D objects within, you're making a 2D game, like a side-scrolling beat 'em up or whatever, and then you could use this to create the characters, the backgrounds, whatever. So, the first thing I want to do is I want to show you a couple aspects of the UI, and then we'll get into the way that you actually draw it with Inkscape. So, first of all, as you notice, these icons are fairly decent size. They're not actually this size by default. They're actually smaller. So, depending on how large you want the icons to be, what you can do is you can come up here to Edit, come down here to Preferences, and if you select the Interface top category, don't choose any of the subcategories, just click on interface itself. You'll see here toolbox, control bar, and secondary toolbar. You can just change the size. I set them to larger, which is the larger size. You can change them to smaller. There's no apply or OK. You simply make the change, close it, and then you have to restart the application. So you simply change these to whatever you want, and then you restart the application. Second, obviously this is too small to actually draw on. So if you hold the CTR key, so the control key on your keyboard, and you scroll the scroll wheel forward or backwards, you can zoom in and out. Now, if you want to pan around, that is just, so not holding anything on the keyboard, you're just pressing down on the scroll wheel and scrolling about. You're just panning about. Okay, so that handles the basic navigation of your document, of your project. Now, the main way in which Inkscape is similar to Anime Studio is they are both vector-based. So what happens is if you draw a line, what you've actually done is you've actually drawn a bunch of points, and in real time, the line is being drawn. So if you don't like a line, you don't have to erase a line and start again. What you can do is you just move those points that have been created. So again, you draw a line, but what you've actually done is you've drawn a bunch of points. You just move the point to nudge the line, so you don't have to draw it all over again. So that's important to understand that it's kind of like sculpting, because you're drawing a bunch of control points and then you're moving them. If that doesn't feel natural to you, then you're probably not going to like this. You can draw freehand, but even in freehand, you're still actually creating those control points. So let's see how that actually works. So down here, you have the Draw Bezier curves. So if you click on that, let's zoom in a bit. So there's two ways to do this, and I just want to point out that when you choose a tool, you usually have additional tools up here. I'm not going to go through all of these because that would make a very long tutorial, and this is really just meant to be a basic introduction. It's just to let you know, hey, there's this application called Inkscape. Here's a few of the UI settings, and here's an overview of the tools. If you want me to do a deep dive, just leave a comment and say, hey, show me how to do this or show me how to do that. Okay, so back to the tool. So we have this selected. You can left click, let go. It automatically has a line. Left click, let go. Left click, left click, left click. And we connect it. You've made a shape. But what if you want to change the curvature? Because as I mentioned, the idea with a vector-based drawing application is that you have points that you can change. So let's do this again. We still have our tool selected, but let's left click. But this time, don't let go. It's click and hold. And don't let go until you get to your next point. Left click and hold. See what's happening? You're now creating a control line. So I haven't actually extended out the line yet. I'm creating a control line to handle that curvature. If I let go, now I have the actual border, the actual shape line. Left click, hold. Again, as I'm holding, it's creating that control line. Let go. And now I'm going to, if I click again, we'll create that point. So we'll just left click there and then left click there. See how this one became pointed because it didn't have that control line? Now, that brings us to the second tool. And honestly, these are the tools you're probably going to use the most. Because again, like I said, this is really a lot like sculpting. So you've drawn your basic shape. If you come up here and you click on Edit Paths, as you can see again, there's all different options up here. We're not going to get into them because this is just an overview. What you can now do is when you click on the tool, you see the points have appeared. I can do one of two things. I can click on the point and get access to that control line, okay? Or I can just move the point itself. So see how I've got the point itself being moved, or I can move the control lines. So either the control line or the point. And my apologies if I keep saying that. It's just a key understanding of what you're doing. Click on this one. Only has a point, no control lines. Now, as I mentioned, you can freehand draw. So there's this tool here. You can freehand draw, and it looks like you've drawn a line. But again, if you go to your modify, your edit paths, see all the vectors, all the points, as well as their control lines appear. So like that's a point, but those surrounding it are the control lines. So even with freehand, you really are still drawing those points. And there's different shapes as well. Like we've got a spiral. Nothing really special. It's a spiral. Click on this one. As you can see up here, you have two choices. You can either do this shape. Oh, by the way, the reason why it's auto-filling in is because when I was testing this, I selected a color. Down here you can see it says fill, so it's filling in the color. We'll get into that in a minute. So we can click on the star. Same thing, you can draw a star. Circle, you have a couple options here. By default, well, I shouldn't say by default. By default, it's on this one, which is just a circle. But again, since I was playing around with this, it's using this. So if I draw this, you have this section taken out, which is controlled by this control point. You can switch to this one, so where it's like a slice, okay? Or you can just go to here, where it is the circle itself. And if everything's working as intended, if you grab the point and then you move it along here, if you move it along the perimeter, you can see it now toggles back to these options. This is a little bit different. This is a 3D cube. Now, the reason why you could use this is a lot of reasons, but one type of game is an isometric game. Used to be more popular during the 2D days. Nowadays, it's easy enough just to use an actual 3D environment, point the camera down at a certain angle, and it looks isometric. But in the old days, before we had 3D, you could make an environment look like it was 3D, like something like Landstalker. And there's many of other examples too, like a lot of the games with the name Tactics in it, so Ogre Tactics. Even now, the Disgaea games, they actually use a 3D environment, but that kind of perspective. But yeah, so you can just like draw this box, and it looks like it's a 3D box. And depending on where you're drawing it and what direction you're drawing in, depends on how it looks. This alone could be an entire tutorial. I have square. Now, if you notice, it's curved. That's because, again, the last time I drew this, I was using the curvature. Here's the control point. And you can curve this. Now, if you were to draw one like that without the curvature to begin with, you just got to grab that corner, and you can see that you can curve the corners. Now, because of the size of the icons, there's a few that are hidden. So you just, or I shouldn't say hidden, they don't fit. You have like eraser, paint bucket, gradient, mesh, dropper, connector. So let's just do paint bucket, and then that'll probably be it for this video. So typical paint bucket, you have colors that you can select. That's the most recent one that's still selected. So as soon as I chose a color, it changed. Otherwise, you can just use this like any other paint bucket. Watch what happens when I do this. It only paints one side, so that's a nice effect. And I think that's about it, actually, because again, the purpose of this video is just to let you know awareness that Inkscape at inkscape.org is available. It's free to use, vector-based, 2D illustration, and that it takes up some of the slack that Anime Studio does. So again, free to use. If you want to see a deeper dive, just let me know. Leave a comment and say, can you show me how to do X, Y, and Z? And I'll do my best to get that video up. But for now, I think that should do it. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that this is another tool in your toolbox that helps you with game design. Again, whether you're the indie developer or you're the student or the hobbyist, I hope this helps you in your endeavors. And that, again, if there's something you want to see, just let me know.